The receptionist laughed at Jonathan Roumie's accent. Not a polite chuckle, not a friendly smile, she mocked it right in front of everyone. "Wow. That accent," she said, tilting her head and smirking. "Where are you even from?" Her words hung in the air like a balloon ready to pop. People around her snickered nervously, unsure whether to laugh or look away. Some whispered to their colleagues, "Who does he think he is?" Jonathan didn't react immediately. He simply stood there holding his documents, his calm eyes scanning the busy office. The soft hum of printers, ringing phones, and keyboard clicks filled the room. But for a moment it all seemed to fade. It was a regular morning at Crestwood Enterprises. Phones were ringing, coffee was brewing, and the receptionist, Lisa, was in her usual mood, showing off in front of anyone who would watch. She loved to be the center of attention, and today she had found her target. Jonathan, however, was no ordinary visitor. He walked in with the quiet confidence of someone who knew who he was and what he stood for, but didn't need anyone's validation. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Lisa's exaggerated gestures, her laughter, and the whispering colleagues trying to get a peek at the supposed new client. When she made the comment about his accent, the office erupted in forced chuckles. People looked around, some trying not to stare, others pulling out phones to secretly record the moment. But Jonathan didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout or get defensive. Instead, he gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile, one that hinted he had seen moments like this before. He took a step closer to the counter, handing over his documents with care. "I just came here to do my work," he said softly.
Nothing more, nothing less. The words were calm, but they carried weight.
And just like that, the energy in the room shifted. People stopped laughing. Phones lowered. Lisa's smirk faltered ever so slightly. Jonathan's presence alone seemed to demand respect. And yet no one could have guessed what would happen next, a reaction so powerful, so silent, that everyone in that office would remember it for years. The office had fallen silent, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lisa, the receptionist, still wore a forced smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She had expected Jonathan to flinch, maybe snap back, or even leave in embarrassment, but he hadn't. His calm, measured presence had already unsettled everyone. Jonathan placed his documents carefully on the counter, making sure they were perfectly aligned. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch. He simply looked at Lisa, his eyes steady, calm, yet piercing in a way that seemed to see right through the arrogance she was projecting. "Sir, we have certain procedures here," Lisa said, attempting to regain control. Her voice had a hint of nervousness now. "You need to fill out these forms first." Jonathan nodded politely, reaching for the forms. "Of course," he said softly. "I'm happy to follow your process." Some of the office staff started whispering to each other. "Isn't that Jonathan Roumie? The actor?" "Yes," another whispered back. "From the shows. The movies. I think that's him." Lisa caught a glimpse of the whispers and felt a jolt of unease. Her smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of panic. How had she misjudged him so badly? Jonathan began filling out the forms meticulously, his pen moving smoothly across the paper. Every movement was calm, controlled, deliberate. And yet there was an aura about him that demanded attention. People who had been laughing seconds before now couldn't take their eyes off him. The receptionist who had tried to mock him was suddenly painfully aware of the power imbalance in the room, but not in the way she had imagined. "You know," Jonathan said without looking up, his voice soft but firm. "People often judge based on what they see first. Accents, appearance, even the smallest differences. But that doesn't define a person." Lisa swallowed hard. She could feel the weight of her mistake pressing down on her. She wanted to apologize, but her pride got in the way. Meanwhile, her colleagues were shifting uncomfortably, some glancing at their phones as if to record the lesson unfolding before them. Jonathan finished the forms, placed the pen down, and looked up. The room held its breath. "I came here today for something very simple," he continued. "But it seems I've already given everyone an important lesson without even trying." The tension hit its peak when he stood up straight, holding the documents with quiet dignity. His calm composure contrasted sharply with the receptionist's jittery posture. Some staff started whispering, pointing subtly. "Is she really going to handle him like that?" One muttered. Lisa tried to regain control, her voice shaking slightly. "Sir, do you need anything else? Anything at all?" Jonathan smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. No, I've gotten exactly what I needed. And then the reaction that no one expected came. A senior manager who had been watching silently from the side stepped forward. He cleared his throat and asked, "Jonathan Roumie, is it really you?" "Yes," Jonathan replied calmly. "It is." The room erupted in gasps. Phones were pulled out and whispers turned to exclamations. People who had been mocking or laughing moments ago now stared at him with awe and respect. The receptionist froze, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide. Jonathan placed the documents back on the counter and said quietly, "Respect isn't given because of fame or status. It's earned through actions, not appearances. It's what we show each other in every interaction, especially when we think no one is watching." Lisa's shoulders slumped. Her smirk was gone completely. She had learned a lesson the hard way in front of everyone, and the office, which had been buzzing with idle chatter just minutes ago, was now silent, absorbing every word he had said. Jonathan turned toward the exit. His calm stride, his quiet dignity, left a lingering impression that no one could ignore. Every whisper, every glance in the office was now colored with awe, humility, and a touch of embarrassment. In those moments, one thing was clear. Jonathan Roumie didn't need to yell, shout, or confront anyone to assert his presence. His respect commanded attention. His humility had won the room. And the receptionist who had laughed, she would never forget this moment for the rest of her life. The office had seen many visitors, many actors, many clients, but none had left a mark like this. And as Jonathan walked out, the silence turned into a shared understanding, a lesson in dignity, respect, and the quiet power of self-confidence. The office was silent, the kind of silence that makes every small sound feel enormous. The usual hum of printers and phone rings seemed distant, as if the entire world had paused for a moment. Jonathan Roumie had turned toward the exit, his calm, composed figure moving gracefully, yet leaving a ripple of impact that no one could ignore. Lisa, the receptionist who had laughed at his accent, stood frozen behind the counter. Her fingers twitched nervously as if she wanted to reach out but didn't know what to say. Her colleagues exchanged glances, eyes wide with disbelief. Some had been recording the moment, phones hovering awkwardly in midair, unsure whether to capture the lesson unfolding before them or the sheer humility of the man leaving the room. And then, it happened. A soft, almost unnoticed sound of footsteps echoed in the lobby. Not Jonathan's, but heavier, more authoritative steps. A tall, sharply dressed office executive entered the room, carrying a thick folder of papers. Behind him, two more executives followed, their expressions a mix of urgency and reverence. "Jonathan Roumie," the first executive called out, his voice cutting through the quiet like a spotlight in the dark. "We've been waiting for you." The room erupted into murmurs again, but this time it wasn't mockery. It was awe. People whispered, "That's him. That's really him. And he's not just a visitor. He's more than that." Lisa's face drained of color. She looked as if someone had punched the air out of her lungs. Her arrogance, her smugness all vanished in a heartbeat. She realized now that the man she had mocked was not only respected in the industry, but had come to the office for a reason that mattered far beyond casual interaction. Jonathan turned slightly toward the executives. His calm smile returned, subtle, almost imperceptible yet commanding. "I came here to deliver some documents," he said quietly, his voice carrying steady authority. "But it seems this visit has already delivered a lesson of its own." The executives approached, bowing slightly, presenting the documents. "Sir, this is for your approval," one said. "We've been instructed to ensure everything is ready for your review." Lisa's eyes widened as she processed the weight of the situation. The man she had mocked wasn't just a visitor. He was a key decision-maker, someone whose presence could affect careers, policies, and reputations. She had humiliated herself in front of not only a celebrity, but a person of influence and respect. Jonathan nodded politely, accepting the documents. "Thank you," he said softly. Then he turned to the room, making eye contact with everyone. "Let this moment be a reminder," he said, his voice steady but carrying profound gravity. "Respect isn't earned by fame or power. It's earned through everyday actions, and arrogance, no matter how small, can blind even the most confident of minds." The office staff absorbed his words in silence. The tension in the air transformed into something heavier, an understanding that Jonathan's presence alone had taught them a lesson in humility, dignity, and grace. Lisa finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, she said, trembling. I shouldn't have laughed. I shouldn't have judged you. Jonathan smiled faintly, a glimmer of warmth in his eyes. Apologies are important, he said softly. But the real lesson is not in saying sorry. It's in understanding why respect matters, and showing it even when no one is watching. The executives led Jonathan toward the elevator, but before he left, he paused to give Lisa one last look. It wasn't one of anger or judgment. It was calm, measured, and quietly commanding. It said more than words ever could. This is how respect is shown. As the doors closed behind him, the room remained silent for a few moments. Then, slowly, the staff began murmuring among themselves, processing the gravity of what had just happened. Lisa slumped in her chair, humbled, aware that she had learned a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. Jonathan's exit wasn't flashy. There were no dramatic gestures, no loud declarations, but the impact he left behind was louder than any shout, more powerful than any argument. He had shown that true strength lies not in mocking others, but in self-control, humility, and the quiet power of dignity. And so the lesson lingered, echoing through the office long after the doors closed. Respect isn't something you reserve for the powerful. It's something you give to everyone, always, because the person you look down on today could be the one teaching you a lesson tomorrow. Type respect in the comments if you agree, and share where you're watching from, because humility is a universal language, and every kind soul deserves recognition. The elevator doors closed and Jonathan Roumie was gone, yet the silence he left behind in the office was deafening. For several seconds no one dared speak. It was as if the room itself was processing the weight of what had just occurred. The air felt heavier, charged with an unspoken lesson, one that no training manual or office policy could ever teach. Lisa, the receptionist, sat frozen behind her desk. Her hands, once so confident as she typed and gestured, now trembled slightly. She stared at the empty lobby, replaying the moment over and over in her mind. The laughter she had directed at Jonathan, the mocking tone, the smug smirk, all of it now felt like a distant memory of someone else. She realized she had misjudged him, underestimated him, and most importantly, misunderstood the power of quiet dignity. Around her, the office staff slowly began to stir. Whispers filled the space, but they were different now, not filled with gossip or judgment, but with awe and reflection. A junior staffer nudged a colleague and whispered, "Did you see that?" He didn't even raise his voice. And yet, everyone listened. An older employee who had been observing the interaction from the back shook his head with a wry smile. It's a lesson in humility, folks. Loud arrogance gets attention for a moment, but quiet respect, that lasts forever. Lisa finally found her voice. I should have treated him with respect from the beginning, she admitted softly, almost to herself. Her colleagues turned to look at her. Some nodded quietly, acknowledging the courage it took to admit a mistake. I judged him based on an accent, not on the person, she continued. And that was wrong. One of the senior managers stepped forward, clapping his hands softly to gather attention. Let's take this as a learning moment, he said. Jonathan Roumie didn't just come here for a transaction. He came here to remind us of something we all too often forget. Respect isn't about status, wealth, or celebrity. It's about how you treat every human being every day in every interaction. The office staff murmured in agreement, the lesson slowly sinking in. Some pulled out notebooks to jot down reflections. Others just sat quietly, thinking about how often they too had underestimated someone based on appearance, voice, or background. Lisa took a deep breath and made a decision. She straightened her posture, her eyes filled with newfound determination. From now on, she said quietly but firmly, I will remember this moment. I will treat everyone with respect, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from. I will remember Jonathan's example. Her colleagues smiled at her, silently encouraging her commitment. And in that moment, the office shifted, not just in attitude but in culture. A seed of humility sown by Jonathan's calm presence had taken root. It was a small moment in time, but one that would ripple through every interaction in that office from that day forward. Later that afternoon, the staff began sharing stories about other times they had misjudged people. Each story sparked laughter, understanding, and the realization that everyone had moments of pride or arrogance. The office wasn't just reflecting on Jonathan Roumie, it was reflecting on themselves, their values, and the kind of people they wanted to be. By the end of the day, Lisa had written a personal note on her desk. Respect is not given. It is shown, every day in every action. It was a quiet reminder, one she intended to see every morning before starting her work. And though Jonathan Roumie had left the building, his presence lingered like a gentle but powerful echo. His lesson wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It was subtle, profound, and unforgettable. Because in the end, true respect isn't about grand gestures or public recognition. It's about small acts of humility, a quiet acknowledgement of another person's dignity, and the understanding that the way we treat others, even in moments no one is watching, defines who we truly are. The office had learned that day what many never do in a lifetime. The loudest voice does not carry the greatest authority. It is the calm, the composed, the respectful, and the humble who leave the deepest impressions. And in a world where arrogance often overshadows character, Jonathan Roumie had reminded them all that true strength lies in quiet dignity. Type respect in the comments if you believe humility is real strength, and share where you're watching from because lessons like this deserve to be remembered. The office had returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the energy was forever changed. Phones still buzzed, keyboards clicked, and the distant hum of the printer resumed, but something intangible lingered in the air. The staff wasn't just thinking about their day-to-day tasks anymore. They were thinking about respect, humility, and the quiet power of integrity. Lisa, sitting at her desk, stared at the now empty entrance. Her mind replayed the morning in vivid detail, her laughter, the mocking tone, the shock on her colleagues' faces, and most of all, Jonathan Roumie's calm, unwavering presence. The way he had handled the situation wasn't confrontational. He hadn't yelled, thrown a tantrum, or demanded an apology. Instead, his dignity had done all the talking, and it had spoken louder than anyone could have imagined. She took a deep breath, realizing something fundamental. Respect isn't about fear. It isn't about authority or fame. It's about empathy, understanding, and recognizing the inherent worth of every individual. Jonathan had shown her that lesson without raising his voice, without theatrics, without even needing anyone to notice. Across the office, whispers transformed into conversations. Colleagues who had previously been competitive, guarded, or dismissive began discussing how they could change their own behavior. "I think I've judged people unfairly before," admitted one young employee. "Just because someone doesn't speak like me or dress like me or come from my background doesn't mean they're any less capable." An older manager nodded, adding, "It's easy to be arrogant when you feel powerful. But humility is a strength most people never truly understand." Lisa listened, absorbing every word, and felt a resolve she hadn't known before. She realized that her morning mistake, her laughter, her mockery had become a turning point. Not just for her, but potentially for the entire office. She wanted to make sure Jonathan's lesson didn't end when the elevator doors closed. She wanted it to ripple outward, shaping the culture around her. She stood up, cleared her throat, and addressed the staff. "Everyone, I want to say something," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I made a mistake today. I mocked someone based on their accent, and I thought it was harmless. But I've learned something far more important. Respect is not given based on fame, power, or status. Respect is shown in every interaction every day, no matter who we are speaking to." The room fell silent again, this time in attentive anticipation rather than shock. Lisa's honesty struck a chord with her colleagues. There were nods, murmurs of agreement, even a few smiles of admiration. Her apology wasn't just words, it was a commitment to change, a promise to embody the lesson Jonathan had demonstrated so effortlessly. Meanwhile, someone had quietly posted a short clip of Jonathan entering the office, the moment of initial laughter and his calm, composed reaction. Within minutes, it began circulating on social media. Comments poured in from viewers across the world. "This is a lesson everyone should see. Humility wins every time. We need more people like him in the world." Back in the office, Lisa looked at her colleagues and smiled, a sense of purpose in her eyes. "From today," she said, "let's make this our standard. Not because someone famous is watching, but because it's the right way to treat every human being." And in that moment, the office understood the full magnitude of the morning's events. Jonathan Roumie hadn't just delivered documents. He had delivered a lesson that would echo far beyond the walls of that building. He had shown them that real power isn't loud. Real strength isn't aggressive. Real respect isn't earned by wealth, status, or celebrity. It's earned by showing humility, kindness, and dignity every single day. As the day drew to a close, the staff left the office with a newfound awareness. Conversations carried the lesson further, inspiring changes in behavior, in mindset, and in attitude. Lisa stayed behind for a moment, placing a small sticky note on her monitor. Respect is strength. Humility is power. Treat everyone with dignity. Jonathan's presence had departed, but his impact was indelible. It was more than a viral moment. It was a quiet, profound shift in perspective. A reminder that one person, by simply living their values, can leave an imprint that resonates far beyond their immediate actions, and so, the office and the people within it carried a single, enduring truth. True respect is silent, but its echoes are heard everywhere. True power is not shown in how loudly you assert yourself, but in how gracefully you treat others. And the smallest acts of humility can leave the largest impressions. Type respect in the comments if you believe humility is real strength, and share where you're watching from. Because lessons like this aren't just for today. They're for a lifetime. The office was quiet now, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. It was a thoughtful, reflective quiet, the kind that comes after a profound lesson sinks in. People moved more deliberately, spoke more carefully, and glanced at one another with newfound awareness. Every small gesture, every conversation seemed to carry the echo of the morning's events. Lisa sat at her desk, staring at her hands. She had replayed the encounter countless times in her mind, her laughter, her smirk, and then the way Jonathan had calmly taken his documents, smiled faintly, and taught a lesson without ever raising his voice. She realized now that this was a turning point, not just for her, but for the entire office. A few colleagues approached her, some hesitantly, others with a sense of solidarity. "Lisa," one whispered, "thank you for acknowledging it. It takes courage to admit a mistake like that." Lisa nodded. "It's more than courage," she said softly. "It's understanding. I see now that respect isn't something you reserve for people who impress you. It's something you show to everyone every day, whether they notice or not." From the back of the room, the senior manager who had observed the entire incident stepped forward. "I think we've all learned something today," he said. "It's not just about Jonathan Roumie or the morning's events. It's about how we conduct ourselves in every interaction, in every moment. Respect is not conditional. It's universal." Lisa felt a sense of relief and clarity wash over her. She straightened her posture, feeling a responsibility she hadn't felt before. She realized that her behavior had affected more than just herself. It had set a tone in the office, one that could either foster respect or breed arrogance. And now she had the chance to set things right. "I've made a decision," Lisa said, her voice stronger now, filled with conviction. "From today, I'm going to treat everyone who walks through these doors with the same dignity and kindness I hope to receive. No exceptions, no judgments, not based on accent, appearance, or status." Her colleagues nodded, some smiling, others quietly inspired. The energy in the room began to shift, transforming from tension to purpose, from discomfort to determination. They were no longer just staff members at a corporate office. They were witnesses to a lesson in humility, and they had the chance to carry it forward. Later that afternoon, Lisa noticed a small group of colleagues gathered near the windows, discussing ways to improve office culture. Ideas flowed freely: mentorship programs, peer recognition, daily reminders to treat everyone with respect. The conversation, once mundane and focused solely on tasks, had evolved into something meaningful. Jonathan Roumie's visit had sparked more than awareness. It had ignited change. Lisa returned to her desk and pulled out a notebook. She wrote down a simple note. "Respect is not earned through power. It is shown through action every day." She placed it where she could see it every morning, a quiet reminder of the lesson that had reshaped her perspective. Meanwhile, the video clip of Jonathan's visit had gone viral online. Comments poured in from all over the world. "This is a lesson for everyone. Humility over arrogance. Always. We need more people like him." Lisa watched the comments, feeling a sense of validation, not for herself but for the lesson. She realized that the ripple effect of respect and humility could reach far beyond the office walls. By the end of the day, the staff had collectively decided to adopt a new approach to their work environment. Meetings were held with a focus on collaboration rather than competition. Small acts of kindness became daily rituals. And every time someone smiled at a colleague, listened patiently, or offered help without expectation, it was a quiet nod to Jonathan's example. As Lisa finally packed her things to leave, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not just for the lesson itself, but for the opportunity to witness it firsthand. Jonathan Roumie's presence had left a permanent mark, not through words shouted or dramatic gestures, but through calm, unwavering dignity. She paused at the office door, looked back at her colleagues, and thought silently, "This is how respect spreads, quietly, intentionally, and without need for recognition." And as the sun set outside the office windows, the building itself seemed transformed. What had started as a moment of embarrassment and judgment had evolved into a lasting culture of respect, humility, and quiet strength. Every person who had witnessed the events carried a renewed understanding. True power is not loud, true respect is not conditional, and the smallest acts of humility can leave the largest impressions. The office had long since quieted after Jonathan Roumie's departure, but his presence still lingered like a gentle echo. The lesson he left behind was not written on a whiteboard or outlined in a policy manual. It was embedded in the actions, thoughts, and attitudes of everyone who had witnessed it. Lisa, the receptionist who had laughed at his accent that morning, sat at her desk reflecting on the day. She thought about her reaction, the arrogance, the laughter, the underestimation of someone based on something as trivial as speech. She realized that respect is not a privilege reserved for the famous, the wealthy, or the powerful. Respect is a responsibility, something we owe to every person every day. It wasn't just about humility. It was about awareness, about realizing that every interaction, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, carries weight. A careless word can wound, a thoughtful gesture can uplift, and the quiet dignity Jonathan had displayed, it spoke volumes without a single shout. Throughout the office, the impact was clear. Staff members were talking in hushed tones about what they had witnessed. Some shared personal stories of times they had misjudged people. Others reflected on moments when arrogance had led them astray, only to recognize the quiet strength and humility. The office, once a place of routine monotony, had transformed into a space for reflection, learning, and growth. Lisa finally rose from her chair, her resolve firm. She walked around the office, addressing colleagues individually. "Remember what we saw today," she said softly. "Respect isn't given based on status. It's shown in the way we treat everyone, especially when we think no one is watching. That's how we honor others, and in doing so, we honor ourselves." A young employee nodded, smiling. "It's amazing how someone can teach such a profound lesson without raising their voice. I think we all needed to see this." "Exactly," Lisa replied, "and we can carry it forward. Every small act of humility, every kind word, every moment of patience, those are the moments that define us." Outside the office, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city. The light seemed to mirror the shift inside, the soft but enduring change that Jonathan's presence had inspired. His lesson wasn't a fleeting viral moment. It was a principle, a truth, and a guide for life. As the staff left for the day, their conversations carried the moral further. They discussed how respect and humility could influence not just the office, but their families, friends, and communities. They realized that kindness and dignity were contagious, and that one person's example could ripple outward in ways they had never imagined. Lisa lingered for a moment, placing a small, sticky note on her monitor. "True strength is silent. True respect is constant. Humility changes lives." She knew she would see it every day and remember Jonathan's lesson, not as a fleeting event, but as a lifelong guide. The office was no longer just a workplace. It had become a classroom for life. Every interaction, every smile, every gesture would now carry a consciousness it hadn't before. And the person who had sparked this transformation had long since walked out the door, leaving behind nothing but the quiet power of his example. In that quiet reflection, a profound truth emerged. True respect doesn't seek recognition. True power doesn't need to dominate. And humility isn't weakness. It's the strongest force we can wield in a world too often obsessed with noise, ego, and status. As the city lights flickered on, Lisa whispered to herself, I hope everyone watching this story remembers the same thing. Respect is earned through actions, not assumptions. Strength is shown through patience, not aggression. And one quiet moment of dignity can teach more than a lifetime of arrogance. So as you read this or watch this or think about it later, remember the lesson Jonathan Roumie imparted. Treat every person with respect. Not because they're famous, not because they're powerful, not because you might gain something in return, but because it's the right thing to do. Type respect in the comments if you believe humility is real strength. Share where you're watching from, and commit to carrying this lesson forward in your own life. Because in the end, it's not the loudest voices that leave a mark. It's the quiet, consistent, unwavering respect for others that changes the world. And that is the ultimate lesson.